Keeper League, lots to discuss. Injuries, Dublin, whole bunch of stuff went down. Hopefully your team is still doing okay, and I mean that both in a football and a fantasy sense. After a couple weeks, now it's starting to balance numbers-wise. Maybe a team had a really good or really bad matchup in the first couple weeks, but it's starting to hedge out, and we're kind of getting a sense of who our fantasy studs and duds are so far. Or are we? I'm not really sure. It's not too late to kind of flip things around. So let's talk a little bit of football, then we'll get to our league results from week 4. Always feels weird to think of, but after 4 weeks, we're over a quarter way into the regular season of fantasy. So it is establishing what's the new normal. And so as I was up at a crazy hour and was actually watching some of the games at 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, etc., just because I was awake, I was noting things down like what's more normal this year and maybe what's a little bit outside of the normal. So just a few things quickly highlighting. Apparently, an American, Skylar Thompson, got jumped in Dublin by some Europeans, some Irish people. Meanwhile, in the U.S., a bunch of the U.S. fans were just going horrible versions of themselves on the Ryder Cup Europeans. I guess Euro-American relations, that's our new normal. Kickers and what they do to the balls now. I don't know how many people know about this, and this is not a setup for a really crude joke. They actually get more control over what they do to the footballs, and all of a sudden, a 60-yard field goal is actually more than well in play, and not just by one or two guys, by a bunch. So I guess just tons and tons of field goals for no particular reason, and teams settling for those field goals. Very much the new normal. Speaking of field goals, we had talked about blocked kicks seeming really, really normal. I was watching the Chicago game, and I know we have some Chicago fans watching, so I'm not going to crap on it. Caleb did not look good if you actually watched the game, but mostly because him getting his passes swatted down by Max Crosby was a massive new normal, to the point that there was a part in the game I wondered if he was going to get another pass off. Crosby just seemed to have his number. Of course, it didn't really matter, and if you looked at the fantasy results, he did all right, and he led the drive at the end, so I guess playing pretty bad for about 3 quarters isn't that bad if you win. Also pretty normal. Speaking of bad teams doing good things, the Giants not being able to have nice toys, that has always been normal. It stinks. They've a running back and a quarterback coming out, having awesome games, rookies, dart and scataboo, and then they lose neighbors. So even though they get the win, they still get the loss. Giants fans, I think, would agree that has pretty much been normal for a while now. Our fumbly Ravens, if you watch the Ravens play, the weirdest team to watch. Their first drive looked absolutely dominant, like the first 3 quarters in Buffalo. After that, I don't even know. Fumble, hamstring tightness suddenly, and they didn't even talk about it. Lamar's just out. That's not normal, but I guess that's normal for this year. Do you start Henry still? You kind of have to. There's a couple guys like that. Speaking of someone that you start and then you immediately regret starting, the Eagles are just not fun to watch this year. That's our new normal. They play the game like Army versus Navy in 1923. It is so dull, and they've forgotten that you actually are allowed to throw it more than 5 yards forward. I think A.J. Brown owners would have loved that one if they can figure that out pretty quickly. Actually, kind of leading off our fumbles and whatnot, I'd be dismissed to say it's not the new normal, but unfortunately, Deshaun Jackson gets references every time someone does something a little bit celebratory at the end and loses it. If you saw Indianapolis and you know Mitchell and what I'm talking about, I will argue, though, he was not celebrating. I don't really understand. He was just trying to grab the ball and stick it out like pretty much everybody else does. Then he kind of grabbed it and fumbled it. It's like if you threw someone their cell phone and they didn't really know how to catch it and it squeezes out. And then once he did it, you can tell he knew he was screwed. And sure enough, replay suggests that was just an 80-yard touchback. So sorry about that one, buddy. Speaking of things that aren't normal, I only have a couple, and you can spot them out pretty quickly. I don't know how many people like watching Brady's commentary. I don't, but I tend to hear about it afterwards. Him making the comment, and I think this is pretty much a quote, that Bucky Irvin could run with Doritos on his heels and not break them. I mean, that's a weird way to say that someone runs on their toes, but also TB12, you don't know what Doritos look or taste like. You got to be kidding me. He probably hasn't had anything like that since he got drunk after, even then it's booze. It wasn't even Doritos. I would actually say 5-10 years since he's had a Dorito, maybe a protein chip. I think that's what he really was going for. It's just they don't have the same shape. Or let's be honest, he's paying someone to write his jokes now because he knows no one thinks he's funny. Last kind of thing that I thought was not normal, but we're getting used to. There was a massive announcement. It was supposed to be normally the halftime announcement, and I know a lot of people care more about this in some of these leagues than football themselves. normally it's like the week one, so you knew something was up. You knew there was negotiations. Rumor has it that maybe it was something to do with Taylor wanting actual ownership rights on the performance, which would make sense. I think it would have been like the 150th performance. All this stuff was lined up. Anyway, it's Bad Bunny, and apparently we had to hear about sourdough and more people getting into it over the last month and a half after the reference on the podcast. All for naught, I suppose. Anywho, now that's only 4 weeks down. Our seasons are starting to kind of form in. Now people are starting to get their tiers. But before we really get ahead of ourselves and start looking at week 5, let's just see exactly how week 4 went down in our leagues. Benjamin, it's been an up and down. You have your weeks up, weeks down. This was definitely a week up. You were our top scorer this week, getting you to 2-2, so congratulations there. And this was a pretty important matchup between you and Mike here. Throwing stones, kicking bones. You both had the one win. Both needed it. Both over-predictive technically, but one way over-predicted. So Thielen Breezy, we'll talk about you first. The fact that you had Drake London as the number 5 wide receiver really helped. But let's be honest, it was finally the Genty performance that justified the first-round draft pick, both for us and for him in real life. Got to be pumped with that, even though the fact he was playing with a quarterback, or maybe because he was playing with a quarterback who kept confusing which team he was on and throwing to the wrong one. So maybe that's why he got a few extra carries or looks. Can't really mess with it. You also had the defense 4 in Jacksonville, so great pickup there against San Francisco. Not everyone saw that one coming. In other leagues I'm in, people didn't have Jacksonville, so the fact that you did definitely helped you out. Although you weren't really counting your pennies at the end here, throwing stones, kicking bones. You did have the quarterback 1 on your bench. Sorry, man. That's a tough one. I mean, Yahoo didn't see it either. You did take the 2 better predicted. Who knew that Hurts just doesn't throw the ball anymore? He still falls forward occasionally into the end zone. Goff had to be the really more challenging one, especially with the score the way it was. You really would have thought that there was a lot more Detroit players that put up top 5 performances. There wasn't, but we'll talk about the one thing that was in a little bit. Either way, it was a big win. Keeps you in the 2-2, just outside of the playoff hunt. Got to be happy with that. And I would imagine this league is going to come down to some points scored. So the fact that you were the top one this week certainly helps you out. In the battle of the department heads, it looks like Jake finally got his first win. Sorry, Keen, had to be your expense. If we take a look just quickly the big kind of point for Jake is the fact that he is lasting even though he's got A.J. Brown, who just is in a weird vortex of a situation. Hampton as a rookie finally came through, so not only could he be a keeper, this week he was definitely a keeper. Didn't crack the top 5, but got real close. Tell you who did, though. George Pickens was the wide receiver, too. No one is really benefiting more, I think, than probably him for the CeeDee Lamb injury. I mentioned Detroit. I mean, against Cleveland, that's just rubbing it in, buddy. But yes, they were the defense one. Weirdly enough, though, even if you made another decision, still would have been a good one because Philadelphia was our defense 3. So that was 3 additional points for making the right call, which you didn't necessarily need. On Keen's side, we can also talk about, and I'm sorry, not trying to rub it in. I know you were going Indiana Jones up here. I know you love Kyle Murray, but yep, just sitting on your bench there was our quarterback 3 for the week. Again, it probably wouldn't swing you, and Woody Marks as a start or Judkins would have been an aggressive call, probably one we would have questioned. Might have helped you out in this particular case because, like I said, of all the all the lines that you think would have spiked on the Browns, Gibbs at least had a decent performance. St. Brown did as well, but he's not here right now. Back in Nakua, though, can't be upset about this one. Not only was he wide receiver 1 on the week, I think he's wide receiver 1 on the year right now, so knock on wood on that one. Keen, you dropped to 2-2, but you're still top 5, which I believe is a playoff team. Jake, you got your first win, buddy. Gotta be pumped about that. Plus, you made a little bit of a side deal, which we'll talk about later. We're going to find that the mighty fell this week. Will, you were 3-0, and I say was in the past tense. I didn't say was, actually, but I just used past tense. You get it. You lost. Joe, you took him down. Got you up to 4th spot with 2-2. How did you do it? Stafford was a big reason why. Quarterback 2, great outing against Indy. Now, unfortunately, you also left some points on your bench. I know TJ's got a nice name, but tell you what, Dallas, where is he? There he is. Dallas Goedert, number 1 tight end, and he's actually been putting up a stink there. He wants to get put off the bench. Of course, I think he's one of those guys. The second he does, he spikes it in your eye. So hey, either way, it doesn't matter because you got the W. It wasn't super close because your other guys did not necessarily ring the top 5, but your running backs here. If all of us, if anyone here, if you finish with 2 running backs with over 20 points, you're probably pretty pumped about it. I did mention St. Brown had a game, kind of one of the only Lions that didn't crack the top 5 though for you. And realistically, that was probably the issue. You didn't have any huge stinkers, but you just needed that 1 or 2 lockdown performances. We look at your bench, it's not like you made a lot of bad calls. You are getting bit with the injury bug a little bit there. Also, it is bear to notice here, if you notice not a lot of running backs I mentioned in the top 5, that's because 2 of them in the top 5 were free agents, Gainwell and Hill. So no one took them. They were 3 and 4 respectively. So just to let you know, this one was predicted to be a lot closer. Still was pretty tight. Still 2 top 4 teams. So you can't be too upset, gents. Speaking of the other mighty to fall, so Andrew, congratulations. McCracken, you did still keep your stranglehold on the league, but you did add 1 in the loss column. And how? You're doing the math now in your head. It's not quite a point, but it's real close. And yes, if you are a Monday Night Football watcher, this one came down to it. I remember pretty much resigning my facts. I actually said the words that day. I had a really good fantasy week, and I'm in a few more than a few leagues. And I was like, well, it looks like I'm going to win them all except for this one, unless Bo Nix goes off. And then Bo Nix went off. I needed, I think, 26.76 points, and I got 0.98 more than I needed. Bo Nix was the quarterback 4 on the week, and and then Houston was the defense 4. Other than that, I didn't have a whole lot of players ringing the bell. It's not like I notched too much. I did throw a dart, but I left him on the bench. I'm okay with it. I'm not going to touch a thing. My quarterbacks did just fine, and you know what? Maybe I'll find a tight end later, or maybe I'll never win another game. I'm not really sure. It doesn't matter. Let's be honest, I got pretty lucky on this one. DK had a great game. He was wide receiver 4. You also, if we keep scrolling down, you did have some overall top performances. Josh Jacobs as the running back 2. But Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson, you would have assumed one of the 2 of them would have had a game. Now, Henry's been off and on. Lamar, it was a weird one. If you were watching it, just all of a sudden he was down. They weren't making a huge stink of it. And then they're just like, hamstring, he's out. So that was a rough one because it certainly wasn't one I saw coming. And if he has an even normal game, or if even he just finishes his game and falls forward a couple times, I lose the game. So I'm fully aware I got lucky. Can't be too mad, McCracken. You're still number 1 in the league, but at least I got a win. Our lowest matchup here, at least our lowest winner, and it was fairly tight within 6 points. Paul, sorry, buddy, you fell on the short side on this one, but it was fairly close. Mahomes was the quarterback 5, but he was kind of your lone stud, and realistically, when you start a defense that actually gives points to the other team, that ain't awesome, is it? On your side, Jim, congratulations. You narrowly got this one out, but hey, 3 wins means you've done it more than once here, and especially since you're top 3 in the league. Going through your team, you had the tight end 3 in Warren, and one that's looking like a pretty decent pickup. Got a couple of rookies here that you're probably pretty pumped about. See how that works out for you. And you did have some points on the bench and some things to think about heading into week 5. But like I said, you were the lowest of the teams that won. But that's not going to matter later because a win is definitely a win. Paul, you still did fine. 2 and 2 is great. Top 6 still make the playoffs, so pretty sure you're not crying too hard. Jumping ahead to week 5, I'm not going to spend a lot of time staring at these points because let's be honest, with injuries, which there was more than a couple, with the bye weeks that I'll talk about in a second, a lot of adding and dropping. It was an active waiver wire, and I expect it to continue. Some people looking for some gems on the side. We also know why it's super tight. Only a couple games separate the top from the bottom here, and obviously a few points in between. So lots is going to happen, but one thing we do want to maybe make a mention of. That's right. Looks like we're going to have our first trade unless it gets voted down. I'm not voting it down. In fact, I'm in favor of making trades a little more expedient. The fact that it takes a couple days can be a bummer. We do have one in the making, though, so make sure you take a quick look. Quarterback is on the move. Old running back. I don't know if these are keepers. I don't know if these aren't keepers. Are these players making a move? Man, I love trades in fantasy football. Well, heading into week 5, like I said, injuries aplenty, but also don't forget about the bye weeks. Now, there's a few bye weeks up ahead that are worse, I think, than this week and will affect more players and more teams. But Atlanta, Chicago, Pittsburgh, Green Bay, that actually is a pretty impactful for the first one. Sometimes the first one comes and goes pretty quickly. This one's going to make a bit of a dent. You can tell by the waiver wire. You can tell by some of the action going down. So if your team is healthy, feel lucky. If bye weeks are not hitting you yet, again, you dodged a bullet. For the rest of us, this is the thick of it. This is what makes the fantasy champions, I guess. I don't know. That's what we tell ourselves. I'm excited. Good luck to everyone out there.